Hello and welcome to Juhl-Sørensen Podcast. My name is Emil and today we are recording here at the Danish National Academy of Music Concert Hall here in Odense. And I'm speaking English today, and that's of course for a reason. It's because today I'm joined by a truly remarkable guest. Today's guest is a very versatile and renowned pianist, improviser and composer. He's based in Paris, so it's a great honor to be joined by him here today. Welcome to you, Jean-Baptiste Doulcet.
Thank you, tusind tak. I'm happy to be here today.
Jean-Baptiste, I want to start off by asking you, what does a typical week look like for you between travel, practicing, composing, if there even is such a thing as a typical week for you?
I don't know if there's such a thing as there are typical types of weeks. There are the ones with travel, with working in the middle of the travels, and depending on the preparation and the stress, the natural stress, that can be there for concerts. There are also the weeks where I don't do much, which I think is very important, and I'm learning more and more to do that, even to implement that in the intense weeks, to have a balance with sometimes even not touching a piano one day. It's not the end of the piano playing. I think it's a mix of things, and also enjoying a bit being around and having time, private time also, which is not a professional moment.
Yeah, so it's actually important for you as a musician that you have this personal life to enjoy, private things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do believe that it goes both ways. The private life and what we live, which is not the work, is inspiring for the work on some conscious and inconscious level, as well as the work, the inspiration, what we do is also bringing something in our private life. So, for me, it doesn't make any sense to it's important to really balance that for that reason, I think.
I want to go back in time a bit. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your first encounter with the piano. How did you begin to play the piano, and what was your first interactions with the instrument like?
I don't recall exactly the first, but basically my dad was a piano teacher. He was giving a lot of private lessons, and he made these for me. Basically, I sat on the piano bench, and he just taught me. I think he wanted to teach me the music and the piano in general, and composition and all of this. So he has been my first teacher, not for a long time, because he wanted, I think, to quickly cut the relationship of being a father and a teacher, which I think was good. But he brought me the taste of it and pushed me to be very creative. So I remember that piano was about sight reading, trying to develop things of basic technique, but also theory a lot, solfège and harmonies and rhythm and many of these things together. But very early, I think I was 4, 3, something, and also improvisation quite early. I think I don't remember when, but maybe when I was 5 or 6, to make me listen a lot of music and try to reproduce it, to copy what it's doing, on top of the theory, on top of sight reading, and I guess that's why my learning went into a very open learning process, and not just this is do your scales or do this, but it was a more almost holistic approach of the music, I would say.
Yeah, so I was actually wondering, like, what kind of repertoire drew you in as a child? If it was mostly like the freedom of improvisation, or more so the great classical repertoire. But it sounds like it was actually kind of a mix of both, and also the thing about recreating the classical styles in your improvisation. Yeah,
it was about the repertoire. I think at the beginning, of course, when you're 4, you don't play anything of repertoire, but it's more this kind of theory, how do you call that? This method with little pieces of music with a song or things like that. And then I think little by little went to maybe Moskovsky etudes. I remember this, that is accessible but still demanding for when you're learning. Then Beethoven sonatas, but without aiming for being, this kind of prodigy of 10 years old that can play everything. It was not exactly the way he was pushing me. He was more supportive. And then, of course, I think sight reading a lot of things and taking the habits to write also my ideas in music in order to compose and that all of this is kind of a big part of what music is. I would say that. Maybe for sure I was not really pushed to listen other kind of music than classical for a while. Maybe a bit of jazz though. But then I discovered myself also all the rest, which I think today is also extremely important to, even when we're a classical musician, to also get inspired by anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when we improvise.
Yeah. Sounds like a very creative approach to the beginning of piano learning.
Yeah, I think so. I think.
You then go on to study piano, improvisation and chamber music at the Conservatoire de Paris.
Yeah, so that's a little jump, of course. Before that, I had some teachers in École Normale de Paris, because you kids can also get there. So I had that for a few years, I remember.
It's like a pre-school for the
Yeah, exactly. It's really preparatory cycle. I don't know how they call that before. I don't know if it exists the same way today, actually. But I had that. I had many conservatoire in Paris, but not the big one. In each arrondissement, in each district, there is one conservatoire. So I went there for teachers that brought me many things. My first real teacher shock. I was 9 until 13, I think. Was called Knut Jacques. He's today the director of one of these conservatory, and I think he's seen that I was clearly, not like the others in a way that I have been taught the piano in another way. So I was improvising a lot. I had absolutely no rigorous way of working. I was like, having a score and studying was boring. So of course I wanted to escape with creativity. And he understood how to frame me without taking that away. And because also when you're a kid, you have to, he's been amazing, and he developed for me many things of how to feel good physically when we play the piano, things that are so important tools when you're young, and that has shaped me a lot. I think even today, retrospectively, I realize that.
Would you say he's one of the people who has shaped your musical journey and made you end up where you are today? Completely.
He's, I think if on top of course my dad, that has been the reason why I started. I think there has been 4 teachers in my life, like real, that has shaped me, and he was definitely the first one to really assume his position as a teacher and try to do something with that. And
you later go on to win prizes at multiple major competitions, including the Long Thibault. I was wondering, what is your relationship with competitions, and what is your opinion about the whole concept of competing in music?
That's a very complex question. I think we all have a different answer. I used to not like it, not do it for a long time. I was seen as a young improviser, and it was different than every other pianist. But my piano level of repertoire was not that high because I was not working. So I was just very easy to sight read, and so it was very fast for me to learn things, but not to get really into it. So it took a while, and I think the Paris Conservatory, having the good teacher for framing me, sending me abroad for an Erasmus, all of this has really clicked actually. And then suddenly I realized that, maybe it's time to try a competition just to see how do I work for it. And that was actually the big change, is that I realized that you cannot simulate, because you are compared to people that plays the same thing than you. It's not like a concert. It's not that it's more important, but the work you provide you cannot fake it. I mean, this is, or else it would not work. So that taught me how to work for something in my own way. I mean, I think we all works differently. And yeah, for me, it was just a help, a push to structure my work. And I decided to go a bit with distance, like, of course, aiming for it, because if you do it, it's because you want to win, I mean, somehow.
Yeah, of course.
But behind that, there's also the experience of the work. And I also decided to change my mind about the fact that, but competition or sold by, or it's mafia or stuff. I mean, if you go that way, then don't do it, because that would never bring you anything. And even though sometimes when I see results or things, I'm a bit not suspicious, but I wonder how's that possible. For example, then in the last Queen Elizabeth, all the women were not ranked at the end of the final. I'm sorry, but it was such a high level. I do not understand that. And I'm not saying that it's a choice of voting against women, for example, or teacher things. I don't see it like that, but I think it does raise question of what are the expectations of how to play Prokofiev third concerto. Then I think there are questions that are not raised and not thought through, and that makes this bias. Kind of that makes something at the end that is just very weird. And I don't care if it's a girl or a guy, but when the level is here, it's problematic. So, for example, if you're in the middle of that, of course you might think like, competition is rotten, and but of course, if you decide to go, I think it's just very important to have a healthy distance, and yet giving everything you have to give. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, competition can definitely be kind of a dividing subject for classical musicians. I believe it was Bela Bartok who said something along the lines of that competitions are for horse races and not for art. But it seems like for you, it's actually as much about like the preparation process that you have something to work up to, so that it shapes you and it gives you discipline in some way as a musician.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, competition should be seen as a bridge, potentially, not as a end in itself, because we all know that competition are not the reality of music, and the proof is that some people win the first prize and they don't have really a career, because there are many things that are not done behind, or because they don't have the shoulders, they realize that they don't want that, or they don't have a good manager, or I don't know, there are many reasons. And you can also have a career without the competitions, but I just think it's a bridge for bringing a clear way to practice for yourself for a moment in your life, not forever. And when it works or it brings something, then it can be a real push. I mean, but there can be still art in competition. We can see that. I mean, there are many people that plays because they really give what they are, and not trying to please a bunch of juries that are anyway, you don't know what's going on in their mind that day. It's just, you cannot predict that. So
I think the most famous example might be Ivo Pogorelik
exactly.
The 1980 Chopin competition.
But I think that's the healthy thing of competition, is that sometimes when something seems to be unfair, I mean, that unanimously everyone disagree on the jury, for example, like exactly in the Queen Elizabeth, this Chinese pianist Jiang Xingmin has been not ranked, and it was such I mean, at the end, she might have a bigger career than everyone else ranked for that reason. So PR can be anywhere in competition, it's not, as far as you're not cynically going for that, you never know what's going to happen. And at the end, what's important is that we find new talents, but it's for sure important to understand that there are many talents that will never do competition or do and not win, and that we still have to get eyes and ears on these people, for sure. And I am, for sure.
Jean-Baptiste, I want to talk a bit about improvisation. So, as someone who has never really been taught improvisation in my years of studying piano. I'm wondering, what's your approach to improvisation? What goes through your head when you sit down at a concert, for example, to improvise a piece?
Well, I always answer the same thing. Nothing happens in my head. Actually, I'm freeing my spirit and my mind to. It's basically when you. It's basically when you talk. We're thinking sometimes, of course, to not say something stupid. Like right now, I'm trying my best. But if you think about what's going on in your mind, not a lot. Like it's just going. It's like a flow because it's a language. And
you're not preparing the next word.
You know where to go. You navigate. You know you will be understood more or less. And so it is with the music as a language. You incorporate reflexes and patterns and things, and you recreate it in order to be also a bit not doing the same thing all the time, because that's also expected, I guess, also for yourself. And so my mind is actually not nothing is happening. I mean, of course, neurologically, I guess many things, as when every human does an action. And I would like to see actually the study, they do now with the pianists, they have this thing. But I would like to see in improvisation what's happening exactly.
Or they scan the brain or something
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
What kind of circuits are connecting and so on. But basically, it's more listening what you produce. And it's also very physical. It's very... about the sensations a lot. You react a lot through the touch also when you play, which I'm trying to do a lot also in the repertoire, because that's what creates the sound. And otherwise, of course, sometimes you have little thoughts like, maybe I should try to get back to this first theme. What was it? But it's very fast.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to think, because you have to do. So sometimes you thinking if you turn off the dishwasher that morning, but that can happen in anything in life, just little moments of okay, and then you reconnect and nobody knows. But I think it's just very human. It's not that there's nothing theoretical happening in the head, like, I have to go to G minor now. It's
so actually
don't have time for that.
I mean, I can definitely agree with like the thing about when you sit down and play, for me, like a classical piece, a piece of Brahms, for example, that your mind can, like, it doesn't really happen anything, or you can think about like, what did I have for lunch or something like that.
Yeah.
So you would actually say, if we do like the analogy of speech, that you have just learned a bunch of vocabulary, a bunch of words, and then you can implement them in your playing, like
exactly.
if you're speaking.
And I think it's really more close to that than the repertoire, because the repertoire, something is still happening, is that we are trying to recall the notes and the structure, like the memory is active. I mean, when you improvise as well, because there's a memory of what it is made from, the music in general. But when you play a Chopin impromptu or I don't know what, then you have to recall the music. And so the fingerings and all of that is very active, even though you're not all the time thinking. So I think it does change a lot the relation to the instrument and to the way of listening, because when you improvise, you just know what to do to make it sounds okay, but there's nothing to follow, or there's no notice, you just go and see what happens, basically. Yeah.
I wonder, now that you bring up like the comparison to speaking, that sometimes you hear that the language has an influence on the music. Like Carl Nielsen sounds like you understand Carl Nielsen better if you are Danish because you speak the language, and probably the same thing with French music. Do you think it's the same with improvisation in some way, that you have sort of an improvisation language that's different, that your improvisation language is different than mine, for example?
Yeah, I guess so. That's a really good question. I think it's... I definitely believe that music is related to the language, and that is why French music is maybe more feeling because of the language, or that Danish has more, or Hungarian with the accentuation. And of course this is everywhere in the music in a somehow in very inconscient way, I guess. But then when it comes to the improvisation, I guess we're nourishing ourselves from many influences that are linked to where we come from and what we hear and how we see things in music. I think I've been just taught improvisation in a way where for a long time it was about saving as much as possible patterns of any composers. And I would say even today, for me, it goes beyond. It's about every style, even metal music, which is not really my cup of tea. But sometimes I hear something and I'm like, well, that sounds good. What does that do if I try to do something like that in the piano?
So it's actually replicating a style.
Yeah, and then find your way in order for that to not be a copycat thing, which can also be if you do like a battle or a history of music, because that's also great for yourself. It's to and for the audience to see like, wow, he can do like it really sounds like Schubert or something. It's really entertaining for the people and for yourself. So that's also a possibility, and I think we should also not go against that. But I think it's just important that you can copy and try to do your best Chinese copy of something.
Yeah.
And also to have your language and try to find roads that are not taken or that goes out of your comfort zone or knowledge, and try out, because that's also very exciting.
And now that you mentioned like the entertainment value for the audience as well in improvisation, I mean, improvisation has been an important discipline throughout history for musicians like Chopin or Beethoven or many others. But it seems like today for classical musicians, a lot of places at least, it's seen as kind of a dead art. It's not really something that we deal with. As I mentioned, I've never really dealt with it or had lessons in improvisation, which is weird because it is a part of the tradition. So why do you think that is, and what role do you think improvisation should play for classical musicians nowadays?
I'm not sure why it disappeared. I'm not sure I can answer this question. I just can see that the places where improvisation is still alive, it's because the tradition, as you said, has been kept, and that can be explained for reasons such as organists, because they have every Sunday potentially to improvise for the mass, because jazzmen are taught the music that way, and maybe they miss also something else then, and they often talk about that, but in the other hand they have this very freeing themselves. In classical music we know it has been all the time there by many composers, and I'm not sure why it disappeared, but I see that it's coming back. There's more and more curiosity about that topic today by many young pianists that are like, I really would like to do, and I don't know how to do. And I myself teach also improvisation, and I see more and more of curiosity. And I think it's also the responsibility of institutions and conservatories and everything to recreate that from early age, because we know that learning anything is more easy when we're a kid, because we're a sponge and we're not inhibited by anything. We just receive and redo. And if you start to improvise at 19 years old, or I don't know, when there's so many constructions psychologically about the instrument, the memory, the technique, the this and this, the first thing that comes out, to improvise is the fear, because you're scared to be naked, to do nothing, and this doesn't exist when you're very early. So I think for me, the most important thing would be to rethink the educational system by having mandatory, I would say, improvisation from early age, because it's just funny. It's not. It can be a bit theoretical, but it's about opening your creativity, and at the end, then it doesn't mean everyone has to be able to do improvisation concert, but it's a tool that is so useful for everything in the music, in the repertoire, and that I really teach a lot about that. What do you bring to the repertoire and the sound production also if you improvise. I think.
Yeah, I think for sure it would be very entertaining to like hear a concert with a Mozart concerto, for example, and then the pianist improvises the cadenza or something like that. Or like you mentioned, like the piano battles you've done. Saw a video of you, and I believe it was Aristosham, where you did a piano improvisation battle, where the two of you took turns in playing on different themes and in different composer styles and so on. Very entertaining, and it also made me wonder, like, if you were able to somehow reincarnate any musician or composer from history to do a piano improvisation battle with, who would it be and why this particular person?
And as you said, I think it's very entertaining, and that's why we do it, because on top of the fact that it's interesting, I think many people are craving from some spicy stuff in classical music. And I'm not saying that we have to do whatever, but I think as far as things are well made and in good taste, then let's be creative. Battle is first thing we think it's rap, but that's cool. I mean, it's super interesting. How does that work? And so why not doing that? And it's friendly. It's just, and I really like this battle with Aristo, because it's just a friendly thing, and it's just for people to have fun and see this kind of pulling the strings to each other and composers and things. I've seen a comment not a long time ago of a guy who said like, funny, there's no, because we did all the different composers history, but we had 1 hour, so of course there's not all the composers. And there's a guy who wrote like, funny enough, there's no list, or I don't know whom. I guess it's because it's too difficult for them. And I'm like, dude, we're just trying to do so many things in 1 hour. Of course, but we can recreate that. And the question is not to know if we are equally genius to Liszt. Of course not. It's just another thing. But it's interesting to see how close you can get. And I think improvisation is very interesting for the good ego. It's that it's fine to try to copy geniuses. It doesn't make you think you are yourself Franz Liszt. It's just super cool, and it's nice to listen for people, and you're bringing to yourself so many things pianistically. And we have, I think, in music, in classical music, a little bit of this heritage of be careful of the great masters, and great masters are here to inspire us, not to scare us. And I do not buy that theory. If let's try to knock on the doors of these people and try to go as close as possible. It's just fun. It's not. That's why I call it the good ego.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, like I believe that these improvisation battles, or whatever you would want to call them, has been a part of history, and to some extent, like Beethoven probably did something similar, right?
Can imagine. Yeah.
So if you could like bring back some composer or some musician from history to one of these piano battles, who do you think would be an interesting person to do this kind of stuff with?
It's a difficult question. I think Liszt, because he represents exactly the most what we are doing in improvisation, this capacity of being free, a free musician that can be as well as a great pianist, also arranger, as we know, and composer, as we know, and improviser, as we know, and then even a priest at the end. So I think it's just for me, he represents the full image of what an artist can be, as at least in the piano, and also he represents exactly what can be the highest virtuosic side, while being so profound in many ways. And for me, these relations all the time with the extremes are so interesting, inspiring. So I would guess I would think about Franz Liszt. Yeah, but no.
Yeah, I know it's a kind of difficult question, but I think you are definitely onto something also with the fact that, I mean, I see Franz Liszt as probably, like, I thought about your improvisation battle as like, this is very entertaining, and it's also like very engaging for the audience. And I feel like Franz Liszt has probably had that same kind of quality where like the audience would just go wild and think that, oh, this is so cool and
Yeah.
super exciting for the audience as well. So I think it makes sense that like that same kind of energy we can maybe bring back to some extent into concerts.
Yeah. No, that's true. I can imagine, and we know, I mean, historically, that it was really a rock star, and I think we should really get inspired by that fact. Funny fact: I have a good friend who gave me a month ago a hair of friends list.
Oh,
so
really?
I have that. I put it in a black envelope to be sure to, and that's standing on my piano. It's I mean, I don't believe necessarily in this kind of, but
you rub it for good luck or something.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. It's more like it's so incredible to imagine that these iconic artists are actually also simply a piece of hair, and it just reminds you very frontly that it's like us, and it's very inspiring on that level actually. So I cherish this little.
Yeah, I think a lot of like these historical, very famous composers can almost like be talked up to some kind of god level or something, and it's very, I guess, funny in some way to think about that they were just humans like we are, and they probably drank beer and whatever,
Exactly.
said provocative stuff. They were just like completely everyday people with a very, very great talent, but
and
yeah.
it's very, at the end, it's very moving, I would say, to have a relic like that, because it just reminds you exactly what you're saying, that it's so human. And we used to forget that thing, that part, because of the icons creations and all of this, and
Yeah, and it kind of transcends the thing about being human, the music, but
which I think is also maybe important and inspiring, and that's why we keep going. And but
sure. Jean-Baptiste, you have brought some, I don't know if I should say brought some music, you've played some music for us here today. Why did you choose to play this particular music?
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder who's choosing. Like, if what happened. As I don't know. I'm choosing without making a clear choice in my head. So sometimes I feel like there's someone that has clicked in my head. But I decided to do an improvisation for sure, because I knew we would talk about it, and I thought it was maybe more interesting and for the podcast to not play another piece of Chopin. And why that kind of style in this piece, I don't know. It depends a lot also on the acoustic, on the instrument. I tried the piano before, and I don't know, I felt like trying to do colors and something a bit in a kind of a Stravinsky way, and a bit structured, like a mini suite. So I tried to do that. I hope it's close enough and yet far enough to not be just a copy of something, but not being Stravinsky, of course, that's for sure. But I got inspired by that kind of energy and rhythmical and lyrical put together. Texture also, because of this great Steinway, actually, which is a very beautiful instrument. So that's what happened, I think, quickly in my brain, and then it went in the flow.
It's interesting also, like the thing about improvisation, that maybe if we were here another day or at another piano or in another hall, as you mentioned, you might play something completely different.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, and it also depends of the audience. So today was just us, but when it's in a concert, you have to listen. I mean, you decide for yourself, of course, but still. This depends of the program that has been played before. If there was repertoire and a lot of Chopin or a lot of this, then maybe we're not gonna go on that style and try to spice it up or do something different. Yeah, I guess.
Now that you've played for us here very beautifully here in Odense in Denmark, of course, I came to think about. I believe I've read on your social media and former interviews and stuff like that you've expressed the love of performing here in Denmark and actually in the Nordic countries in general. You've also made an album called Soleil Blanc, where you play music by Nordic composers. What is it about the Nordic culture that resonates with you as a person or as a musician?
There are many things. First of all, it's a bit beyond the music. It's path of life, because my life brought me to Finland, then to Sweden, then to Denmark, and my wife Emil Bjørn is a Danish violinist. So of course these things makes at the end a lot of reason to make a Nordic album as a French. Also because in France it's unfortunately not played. It's a music like piano music of Nielsen is absolutely not played.
No.
Even Grieg and Sibelius not that much actually. So I thought there's something to do about that, to really create the atmosphere of what is Nordic music in general. And because it was a very late discovery for me, for that reason that it's not really played in France, I discovered it quite late, and I fall really in love with this very different way of lighting the music, the harmonies and the structure, the lines. There's something for me that seems so typical, and yet I can see how sometimes. But in the case of Carl Nielsen, I think it's very interesting because he's a very free composer. I would say he's a deeply original composer. I don't like everything, but he always gets my attention, like, oh, he's not where I expect him to be, never. And that I think is a huge quality, especially at that moment of this 20th century where everyone is trying to invent something, and he's in the crossing roads of so many things, and yet it's very much original. So yeah, I recorded the 3 Klaverstück that are posthum opus, and I think it's so interestingly radically modern sometimes, while being very also lyrical and naive, and suddenly something like modern painting a bit for me that I think is very interesting energy. And so I played it a lot in France also, mixed with other things, and it's funny how I can tell that French audience love this music.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I can tell after recital with Liszt or Chopin and Nielsen, Sibelius, they only talk about that. First of all, because they don't know it, and also because there's a singularity and I think something about the time, which is very different, of course. And Sibelius, they always bring it back. Or the Nielsen, even though it's not necessarily that much of easy music to listen, I would say, but they really find it spectacular and as well as very surprising and profound. So yeah, I'm happy that it's a good match. So I want to pursue a bit also on this.
That's interesting that they enjoy that kind of music, because I feel like even as a Dane, some of the later works by Carl Nielsen, it can be a bit difficult because you have, I think also, like as we talked about with the language, I think there's probably a thing about the language and the Danish culture in some way that has a big influence on Carl Nielsen's music. It's something I would think that you maybe have to have a bit of knowledge about Danish culture to really get, because it is kind of rough and weird, and
that's true.
Kind of humoristic at times as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's also very humoristic. That's very true. And we're not that used to humor in music, I guess. except maybe in some Stravinsky, Prokofiev, but it's rare, or Mozart. But then in the middle, it's not that much. Yeah, the surprise, the humor, and he's really into that indeed. And no, I think it's a really big inspiration. And we found out actually with Emily that trying to read all the letters of Ravel, what was the link with Nielsen? That Ravel was a huge fan of Carl Nielsen.
Oh,
he
really?
wanted to meet him, and he went to this concert tribute to Carl Nielsen in the Salle Gaveau in Paris in the 20s. I don't remember when. To listen a lot of pieces from Nielsen, except from Aladdin, flute concerto or clarinet concerto. And he went there. He wanted to meet him, and he talks in letters about the great Carl Nielsen. And I think it's very interesting to hear that, because then we finally found out that in the slow movement of the Fifth Symphony of Carl Nielsen, there is the bolero before the bolero, and it's like literally. And it's unbelievable that Ravel wrote the bolero after that, and I think he heard it in this concert Salle Gaveau. I mean, it's not possible. Then he makes this Ravel great piece, of course, but the material is the same. And I think it's so interesting to see the relation that are hidden sometimes in history, and to research this and see how influential can be composers that we don't think about, and to put them back where they belongs. It's also our role.
Very interesting, and I think for me a bit unexpected actually.
Yeah, I know. I was also.
Ravel is like he's very great at orchestration and.
For sure, and it doesn't make Ravel not being Ravel anymore. It's just interesting, because of course there are influences, and yeah. So.
Very interesting. You're also a composer yourself. What's your approach to composition? I know, of course, a lot of composers have things for example, like impromptus, where it's like a written down improvisation to some extent. Do you find that composition for you is very connected to improvisation, or do you see it as a different process and a different discipline?
It's very connected, but in a segmented way. I use the piano always. I cannot write on the table. So it comes from what I play, or I'm searching for. So it literally comes from a segment of improvisation, and then I try to put the wagons together and structure it. So I have a relation to composition that is really going back to erase and redo. And I have this kind of follow-up of what improvisation is about, which is kind of a composition without a pencil and an eraser. So I think that's a bit the way I write. But at the same time, it's a very solitary work, and I think I don't like that part very much. So I used to not write that much lately. I think it has to come back at the good moment. I don't try to fight that this has to be as much as the piano and the improvisation. I'm seeing myself first as a pianist and improviser. So that's really what I want to highlight. But the composition is, of course, somewhere behind all the time, and I have some ideas and projects that I'd like to do. But I'm just, posing a bit that part. And it might come back very soon, but... yeah.
I want to finish off by talking a bit about the future. So where do you see the future of classical music? How do you think the music will adapt to this, I guess, fairly new musical landscape of streaming and TikTok trends and whatever else is having an influence on the way we consume music nowadays?
That's a large question. Well, one thing I can say is that I'm not pessimistic in general, so I don't like people that says classical music concert is dead and this CD will not exist anymore. Because they're talking, they don't know more than me or you. I just think that, of course, things are transformative, and that's also a good thing. But I think it's us to do something about the fact that classical concert is still alive, and I don't think it's dying. There's so many festivals. Even though after COVID, after many things, I think, of course, I'm not in the middle of budgeting festival and how the money goes and the culture cut budget. Of course, I think there are dramatic things happening about that, but I still see such a huge community of artists in general that are fighting for that. We all pretty much understand well that art and culture is oxygen, especially in these very dark times. And so I have a lot of hope, I think, in humans about these questions, and about the change, the way we consume music. Of course, somehow it makes me sometimes a bit sad to think that we listen a piece of something instead of what represents the cycle. And at the same time, it's also opening music to many more people. So I'm a bit conflicted on that question. I think if we see it in a very simple way, there are the good and bad things, as much as before things were great and also not great because it was inaccessible and it was very for a certain niche person. But I think the real question is how to implement in the classical concert, how to make it more easy to access. And I think it's a work that has started already since a few years, and it's taking good direction. And that's also where I think improvisation has a very, very social impact, even, I would say, not just musical. It's a card to play also for that. For example, you mentioned before the cadenza in concertos. When I can, like in classical concertos, for example, I absolutely do it, because that makes the concert experience something unique. And I think more and more people are looking for that it's a unique experience. It's not just listening classical music, it's a unique experience. And those who are used to the classical concert, they will always have the space to see the classical concert. It's not dying, there's still every year a new amazing pianist, amazing violinist, and it works and it rolls, and it's great orchestra, great conductors. I don't know when I'm on my stream on Insta or things like that, I don't see music is dying. I think music is maybe even a bit too much sometimes, which maybe it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, you have a lot of access to all kind of music that you didn't really have like just 50 years ago, let's say.
That's also fantastic. But yeah, of course there are a lot of questions behind, and I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but yeah, we act on it. So instead of complaining and saying like it's dead, it's this, it's that, we all gonna burn. I mean, yeah, sure, but maybe we can do something before.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I definitely don't think that classical music is dying. I think it was Vikingo Olafsson, I believe, who said that Bach would have been so amazed if he knew that, like, so many hundred years after his death, that people are, like, in the millions are listening to, I believe, like 8 million people or something like that are listening to Bach on Spotify every month, right? So it's really... it's probably to some extent even bigger than ever.
Yeah, for sure. But that's very true if we think, I don't know, but I can imagine that if we think about the great composers, great artists in general, I think they would first be amazed of the capacity we had to produce even more music, even more that, and I'm sure they would be actually so interested and more aware than we are sometimes about the new things, and even in pop music or... yeah, I don't think there are this kind of necessarily these all the long-bearded grandpas that are dead and dusty. I think I think there's a misunderstanding somewhere, maybe. Yeah.
Do you have yourself a musical goal or a project that you would like to realize within your career at some point?
Yeah, I think many. The general thing is to continue finding my space in this big ocean of music and art. I want to work more into the relation with conductors and orchestras, because that's also a core of what we do, and that's you're learning so many things, different things with this also as I can bring the improvisation inside this link with the orchestra. I think that's very interesting, and so I would like to continue having this experience. I had the chance a year ago to do a tour with Klaus Makela for the Petrushka with piano solo version in the Paris Philharmonie, in BBC Proms, and it was such an amazing musical meeting. And I think it's exactly this kind of collaboration I want to continue and to dig into that with these kind of amazing orchestras as well. And yeah, otherwise to bring improvisation somewhere I've not tried also, to find new it's like the metaverse, improvisation is just open worlds and dive into it, and I think it's great. Then of course, recordings of course continue, and I have a lot of projects, and our summer academy here in Odense, the French Connection Academy, is something growing a lot already from the third edition, and we're really happy and proud to do that. As my wife is the director actually, and I'm co-founded it with her, and we aim for exactly acting on what we think could be better, which is also how to help and push all these new talents that are so many knocking at the door, and follow them, and on top of giving them the access of great masterclass and pedagogues to give them a lot of concert experience. So we are partnering with many festivals through the year where they can play professionally, get paid, and play in big festivals. And I think it's we do it because we not had this chance before. When you end up your studies, you're a bit alone, and you have to do competition or find your way. It's complex, and there's so many people. So we want as an academy to be also able to provide that extremely important access, and so it's developing more and more, and we're very happy of that.
Sounds really great, all of it. I'm personally looking forward to see some of your projects being realized or go further than they already are. Finally, I want to ask you, Jean-Baptiste, do you have any advice for any young aspiring pianists who might be watching or listening right now?
Well, I guess many, but what could I say? I think, well, at least what improvisation taught me is that it's also good to never lose the curiosity of actually everything. Curiosity in the music world, but curiosity outside. And all we do, I think more and more, all we do, the travels, the food, the human relations in general, are having an impact on how we express ourselves. That's more and more obvious with time for me. And so it's important to balance everything and cherish that and feel good on many fields in order to be an accomplished musician and find your own musicianship, which is because it's difficult to know which kind of musician am I, what do I want to be. There's many answers to that. I think not just big soloist or teacher, there's many things. And I don't believe anymore in this old myth of the suffering artist and all of that. I think more we balance everything, better we are, and it does have the good consequences. So maybe I think I would say that to young musicians.
I think that's some good advice. Jean-Baptiste Doulcet, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Me.
And to everyone watching or listening, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. See you next time.